नमः सर्वेभ्यः। संस्कृतभारती अर्वैन् केन्द्रस्य राममेलां प्रति सर्वेभ्यः स्वागतम्। संस्कृतं न केवलं काचित् मधुरा भाषा, अपि तु अस्माकं संस्कृतेः आश्रयः अस्ति। अस्माकं संस्कृतेः पोषणं ऋषयः कृतवन्तः। ते तपश्चर्येण यत् ज्ञानम् अर्जितवन्तः तद् गुरुपरम्परया ज्ञानगङ्गारूपेण अस्मभ्यं दत्तवन्तः। अस्माभिः ते सर्वदा स्मर्तव्याः। तस्मात् अस्मिन् केन्द्रे सर्वासां कक्षाणां नामानि ऋषीणां नामधेयानि अनुवर्तन्ते। Sanskritam is not just a beautiful language, it is also a reservoir, cradle for our rich heritage, a heritage that has been enriched and passed on to us through our rishis both men and women. The knowledge systems that they have created for us has been flowing to us through generations like the sacred river Ganga. To commemorate and to give them the tribute they deserve and to make sure our children recognize them, we have named all our classes by the names of the rishis. Tesham Namani, the names of those classes, going from the youngest to the most advanced: Maitreyi, Lopamudra, Valmikihi, Vasishthaha, Vishwamitraha, Agastyaha, Vyasaha च।
यथा अस्माकं सम्प्रदायस्य वर्तते तथा वेदघोषेण कार्यक्रमम् आरम्भामहे। वेदघोषं कुर्वन्ति अस्माकं अर्वैन् केन्द्रस्य विश्वनाथ सूत्र महोदय, कार्तिकेय सूत्रम्, अनीश वशिष्ठ, अथर्व कुलकर्णी च। तो वेदघोष आरम्भं कुर्मः।
श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम। गणानां त्वा गणपतिगं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आर्षण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम्। महागणपतये नमः। प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामभित्र्यवतु। आनो दिवो बृहतः पर्वतादा सरस्वती यजतागन्तु यज्ञम्। हवन् देवी जुजुषाणाघृताजी शग्मान्नो वाचमुषति शृणोतु। वाग्देव्यै नमः। चरणं पवित्रं विततं पुराणम् येन पूतस्तरति दुष्कृतानि येन पवित्रेण शुद्धेन पूताः अतिपाप्मानमरातिं तरेम। श्री सद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। ॐ आतून इन्द्रक्षुमन्तं चित्रं ग्राभं सङ्गृहाय महाहस्ती दक्षिणेन विद्माहित्वा तु विकोर्निन्तु विदेशन्तु विमघम् तु विमात्रमवोभिः न हित्वा शूरदेवानमर्ता सोलित्सन्तम् भीमन्नगां वारयन्ते एतोऽन्विन्द्रं स्तवामेशानं वस्वस्वराजम्। नराधसामर्द्धिषन्नः प्रस्तोषदुपगासि षट्सहस्रामगीयमानम्। अभिराधसा जुगुरत आनो भरदक्षिणेनाभिसव्येन प्रवृषा। इन्द्रमादो वसोर्निर्भात उपक्रतस्वाभरधृषका धृष्णो जनानाम्। अदाशूषरस्य वेदाः इन्द्रयहुनुते अस्ति वाजो विप्रेभिः सनित्वः। अस्माभिः सुतं सनुहि सद्यो जुवस्ते वाजा अस्मभ्यं विश्वश्चन्द्राः वशैश्चमक्षोचरन्ते। गणानां त्वा गणपतिं भवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजम् ब्रह्मणाम् ब्रह्मणस्पतान् शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् निषसीद गणपते गणेश त्वामाहुर्विप्रथमम् कवीनाम् नरते त्वत्क्रियते किञ्चनारे महामर्कम् मघवञ्चित्रमर्च अभिख्यानो भवन्नाथमानान् सखे बोधिवसुपते सखीनाम् रणम् कृतिरणकृत्सत्यशुष्मा भक्ते चिदावजाराये अस्मान् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ
संस्कृतभारती अमेरिका इत्यस्याः संस्थायाः सर्वेषु केन्द्रेषु संक्षेपरामायणपारायणं रामकथापठनं च वर्तते। तेन बालाः रामे एव रमन्ते।
अस्माकं केन्द्रे प्रथमस्तरस्य छात्राः लोपामुद्रा मैत्रेयी कक्ष्येतः रामायणस्य उपकथाः रोचकरीत्या प्रदर्शयन्ति। आगच्छन्तु पश्यामः।
प्रातः परतः भवतः गमनानन्तरम् अस्माकं पितुः मृत्युः जातं। मरणसमये सा केवलं मातृनाम एव जगन्नास्ति। कृपया मां क्षम्यताम्। मम नित्यमातुः कारणादेव भवतः वनवासः पितुः मरणः च जातः। किं पिता मृतः वा? अहो दौर्भाग्यम्। वयम् अत्र एव संस्कारं कुर्मः। भवान् अयोध्यां प्रति गच्छतु, राज्यं पालयतु, तथा एव पितुः आत्मशान्तिं प्राप्नोतु। अहं भवता विना न गच्छामि। भवान् एव राजा भवितुम् अर्हति। पितुः इच्छा अपि एतदेव आसीत्, अयोध्या अपि एतदेव इच्छति। न भवता अहं राज्यं न इच्छामि। पितुः आदेशम् एव मुख्यम्। आत्मशान्तिकारणं 14 वर्षाणि वनवासं यापयामि। अहमपि राज्यं न इच्छामि। मम दुष्टा माता एव एतत् सर्वं कृतवती। कृपया शृणोतु। भवतः प्रत्यागमनं सर्वान् पश्यति। कर्तव्यः भावनात् अपि गरीयते। मां प्रत्यागन्तुं न वदतु। अहं मनः परिवर्तनं न करोमि। अस्तु, किन्तु तावत् स्वस्य पादुके मह्यं ददातु। ते अहं सिंहासने संस्थाप्य भवतः प्रतिरूपे राज्यं पालयामि। केवलं 14 वर्षाणि, किन्तु एकदिनमपि अधिकं। तथास्तु, तदेव करोतु।
नमस्ते, मम नाम नरेन्द्रः।
मम नाम लियो। मम नाम आरुषः। नमस्ते, मम नाम कृष्। नमस्ते, मम नाम सात्विक। नमस्ते, अद्य वयं चिक्रोडस्य कथां वदामः। चिक्रोडः रामस्य सहायं करोति।
श्रीरामः लङ्कां प्राप्तुं सेतुनिर्माणं करोति स्म।
वानरसेनायाः सहायेन सेतुं निर्माणं प्रचलति स्म। अहो, एषा शिला बहु भारी अस्ति। रे अल्पजीवी, सावधानं चलतु। कृपया क्षम्यतां भ्रातः। किन्तु भवान् अत्र किं करोति? अहं श्रीरामस्य सेतुनिर्माणे सहायं करोमि। अहं बहु परिश्रमं करोमि। किं भवान् लघु चिक्रोडः सेतुं निर्माति? अहो आश्चर्यम्। वानरः भ्रातः, कृपया अपहास्यं न करोतु। अहम् अपि सहायं कर्तुम् इच्छामि। अहो, किमभवत्?
चिक्रीडः वीरः रामं सर्वं वदति। प्रियमित्रा, लघुप्राणिनः परिश्रमम् अवमूल्य न करोतु।
किन्तु हे प्रभो, एषः सेतुनिर्माणे कथं साहाय्यं कर्तुं शक्नोति?
लघु शिलाः एव विशालशिलामध्ये अन्तरं पूरयन्ति, पद्यन्ति, दृढं कुर्वन्ति।
तदा बालः ज्ञानोदयं प्राप्नोति। कृपया मां क्षम्यतां प्रियमित्र।
सदा जानातु, प्रत्येकं लघुकार्यम् अपि मुख्यम् अस्ति, अल्पप्रयासः अपि मुख्यः। चिक्रोडा, धन्यवादः। भक्तिः एव मुख्यं, बृहत् कार्यं न। अतः अल्पकार्यम् अपि सेवाभावेन करोतु। धन्यवादः।
सर्वेषां नमो नमः। मम नाम निखिलः। अहम् 11 वर्षीयः। अहं गोन्साल्विस् एलिमेण्टरी विद्यालये 6th श्रेण्यां पठामि। अहं लोपामुद्रा कक्षायां संस्कृतं पठामि। मम कथा हनुमानस्य समुद्रलङ्घयन्। सीता अन्वेषणे वानराः रामेश्वरम् आगच्छन्ति। ततः लङ्का 100 योजनानि अस्ति। तावत् दूरं कथं गन्तुं शक्नोति? केवलं हनुमान् शक्नोति। हनुमान् लङ्घयति। समुद्रं मध्ये मैनक पर्वतः उद्भवति। सः वदति, हनुमान् किञ्चित् विश्राम करोतु, किञ्चित् फलं स्वीकरोतु च इति। किन्तु हनुमान् केवल पर्वतस्पर्शं कृत्वा अग्रे गच्छति। नन्तरं सुरसा नाम राक्षसी समुद्रमध्ये उद्भवति। सा वदति, हनुमान् मम मुखे प्रविशतु। हनुमान् बृहत् आकारं धरति। सुरसा स्वमुखं बृहत् आकारं करोति। हनुमान् लघु आकारं धरित्वा सुरसा मुखे प्रविशत्वा झटिति बहिः आगच्छति। सुरसा हनुमानस्य चातुर्येन सन्तुष्टा भवति। हनुमान् अग्रे गच्छति। नन्तरं सिंहिका नाम राक्षसी समुद्रमध्ये उद्भवति। सा हनुमानस्य छायां घ्रायित्वा खादितुं प्रयत्नं करोति। हनुमान् सिंहिकायाः उदरं गच्छति। तत्र हनुमान् बृहत् आकारं धरति। हनुमान् सिंहिकायाः उदरे छेदनं कृत्वा सिंहिका मारयति। हनुमान् अग्रे गच्छति। नन्तरं हनुमान् लङ्का प्राप्नोति। तत्र लङ्किनी नाम राक्षसी द्वारपालिका आसन्। हनुमान् लङ्किनी पराजयति। सा वदति, अहं पूर्वे ब्रह्मलोके द्वारपालिका आसन्, किन्तु मम गर्वकारणे अहं शापं प्राप्तवान्। अतः अहं द्वारपालिका अभवम्। मम शापं समाप्तः भवति। लङ्का अवश्यम् एव पतति इति। हनुमान् लङ्का प्रविश्य सीतायां मिलति। धन्यवादः। नमो नमः। जय श्री राम, जय श्री हनुमान।
मम नाम अक्षरा। अहं मैत्रे कक्षां पठामि। सर्वेभ्यः रामनवमी पर्वणः शुभाशयः। धन्यवादः।
अत्र अस्मिन् केन्द्रे वाल्मीकिकक्षा, व्यासकक्षा, वसिष्ठकक्षातः छात्राः रामनवम्याः सिद्धता कथं कुर्वन्ति पश्यामः। इदानीं प्रसारयामः। रूपकं रामनवमी आगता।
श्रीरामनवमी शीघ्रमेव आगच्छति खलु शिवानी?
तत् अहं न वदामि। वसिष्ठवाल्मीकिव्यास कक्षानां बालाः वदन्ति। वसिष्ठकक्षायाः अहना, अनघ, ध्रुव, वेद, अनन्या, आरव, वाल्मीकिकक्षायाः ऋषि, दिया, आद्विक च, व्यासकक्षायाः हितस्विनी च।
अद्य शुक्लपक्षस्य पञ्चमी।
श्वः का तिथिः?
चिन्त्रे अद्य पञ्चमी अस्ति चेत् श्वः षष्ठीः एव खलु?
न, तथा निश्चयेन न वक्तुं शक्नुमः।
किमर्थं तथा न वक्तुं शक्नुमः?
किमर्थमित्युक्ते कदाचित् तिथेः वृद्धिः भवति, कदाचित् क्षयः अपि भवति।
कथं तथा?
तिष्ठतु, दर्शयामः। ऋषि भवान् सूर्यः भवति, दिया भूमिः भवति, अद्विकः चन्द्रः भवति। अद्विकः भूमेः परिक्रमं करोति, दिया सूर्यस्य परिक्रमं करोति।
अहं सूर्यः अस्मि। अहं भूमिः। अहं सुन्दरः चन्द्रः।
इदानीं पश्यतु, एषा एका रेखा।
यदा चन्द्रः द्वादशांशान् यावत् अग्रे सरति तदा अग्रिमा तिथिः भवति। प्रतिपद, द्वितीया, तृतीया, चतुर्थी, पंचमी, षष्ठी, सप्तमी, अष्टमी, नवमी, दशमी, एकादशी, द्वादशी, त्रयोदशी, चतुर्दशी, पूर्णिमा।
इदानीम् अवगतं वा? सूर्यचन्द्रयोः गमनवेगे भेदः तिथिपरिवर्तने अपि कल्पयति।
इदानीम् अवगतम्।
बहु सम्यक् प्रदर्शनम्।
कृष्णपक्ष इत्युक्ते का? कोऽपि जानाति वा? तत् अहं जानामि। चतुर्दश्याः अनन्तरं पूर्णिमा भवति चेत् शुक्लपक्षः। शुक्लपक्षे चन्द्रस्य आकृतिः वर्धते। पूर्णिमायां पूर्णचन्द्र अतिसुन्दरः भवति।
चतुर्दश्याः अनन्तरम् अमावास्या भवति चेत् कृष्णपक्षः। अमावास्यायां तु चन्द्रः पूर्णतया अदृश्यः भवति।
मित्राणि, अहं मासनामानि एव न स्मरामि। कृपया मां स्मारयतु।
अपि न स्मरामि।
परन्तु सः तु टेक्सस् राज्ये वसति। कथं पृच्छामः?
वाट्सप् द्वारा। हेलो।
नमस्ते आर्विक। नमः सर्वेभ्यः। सर्वे कथं सन्ति?
बहु सम्यक् आरव।
आरव, भवतः साहाय्यम् आवश्यकं। वयं विस्मृतवन्तः। कृपया स्मारयतु।
निश्चयेन। चैत्र वैशाख ज्येष्ठ आषाढ श्रावण भाद्रपद आश्वयुज कार्तिक मार्गशीर्ष पुष्य माघ फाल्गुन। इदानीं वयं चैत्रमासे स्मः।
धन्यवादः आरव।
मित्राणि, तत्र पश्यतु, हितस्विनी आगच्छन्ति। स्वागतं हितस्विनी। भवती कथमस्ति?
सम्यक् अस्मि।
अस्मि। भवन्तः सर्वे कथं सन्ति? अत्र क्रीडार्थं मिलन्ति किम्?
आम्, क्रीडार्थमेव, परन्तु इदानीं चर्चामः।
कस्मिन् विषये चर्चां कुर्वन्ति?
तिथेः विषये।
अद्य का तिथिः?
चर्चां प्रति स्वागतम्। अद्य चैत्रमासस्य शुक्लपक्षस्य पञ्चमी।
मित्राणि, तर्हि शीघ्रमेव चैत्रमासस्य शुक्लपक्षस्य नवमी।
अस्तु, परन्तु तत्र कः विशेषः?
किं भोः, कथं न जानाति भवान्?
चैत्रमासस्य शुक्लपक्षस्य नवमी रामनवमी।
अस्तु अस्तु, क्षम्यताम्।
चिन्ता नास्ति, रामः मम प्रियः। रामनवम्याम् अहं रामस्य कथां पठामि। अहं संक्षेपरामायण पारायणं करोमि।
अहमपि रामभक्तः एव।
अहमपि आञ्जनेय इव रामभक्ता, तस्य अनुकरणं करोमि।
सत्यं, रामः मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तमः, तथापि सः सीतां किमर्थं युक्तवान्?
रामः सीतां कदापि न त्यक्तवान्। अयोध्यायाः जनाः सीताम् आक्षिप्तवन्तः। रामस्य प्रेरणया एव आञ्जनेयः वाल्मीकिः च तां रक्षितवन्तौ। तर्हि अयोध्यायाः जनाः सीतां त्यक्तवन्तः, न तु रामः। राजधर्मम् अनुसृत्य रामः स्वार्थं त्यक्तवान्। परन्तु पश्यतु, रामस्य सीतायाः त्यागेन जनाः जागरिताः। हिन्दुधर्मे इदानीमपि रामस्य कारणेन एव एकपर्णिव्रतं सर्वे अनुसरन्ति।
प्रिया भवती, रामनवमी किं करोति?
अहमपि आञ्जनेय इव रामभक्ता, तस्य अनुकरणं करोमि।
इत्युक्ते तावत् महत् कार्यं भवती किं करोति?
आञ्जनेयपर्वतम् आनयति वा?
शतयोजनानि लङ्घयति वा? सूर्यं प्रसते वा?
हितस्तमः कूर्दनं करोमि।
धन्यवादः।
भवती सङ्गीतं नितराम् इच्छति इति मन्ये।
आम्, सङ्गीतं नृत्यं च अहं बहु इच्छामि।
अस्तु, ताम् इच्छामपि पूरयामः। अग्रे वाल्मीकिकक्षायाः वेद अभिषेक आद्याराव मीरा अगरवाल छात्राभिः नृत्यं रामस्तुति।
नमस्ते। इदानीं वयं विश्वामित्रकक्षातः कानिचन प्रदर्शनानि पश्यामः। सिद्धान्तः, यदुनन्दनः, श्रेयसः, व्योमः, आर्वी, बहूनि प्रदर्शनानि ते कृतवन्तः। तद् इदानीं वयं पश्यामः।
नमस्ते, मम नाम यदुनन्दनः। अहं रामभजन गायामि। राम 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 जय राम 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 जय राम 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 जय राम 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 दशरथ नंदन राम 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 दशमुखमर्दन राम 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 दशरथ नंदन राम 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 दशमुखमर्दन राम 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 पशुपति रंजन राम 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 पाप विमोचन राम 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 पशुपति रंजन राम 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 पाप विमोचन राम 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 जय राम 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 जय राम 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 अनाथ रक्षक राम 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 आपद बांधव राम 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 अनाथ रक्षक राम 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 आपद बांधव राम 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 मैथिली नंदन राम 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 मारुति वंदित राम 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 मैथिली नंदन राम 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 मारुति वंदित राम 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 जय राम 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 जय राम 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 जय राम 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 दशरथ नंदन राम 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 दशमुखमर्दन राम 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 दशरथ नंदन राम 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 दशमुखमर्दन राम 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 पशुपति रंजन राम 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 पाप विमोचन राम 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 पशुपति रंजन राम 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 पाप विमोचन राम 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 जय राम 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 अनाथ रक्षक राम 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 आपद बांधव राम 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 अनाथ रक्षक राम 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 आपद बांधव राम 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 मैथिली नंदन राम 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 मारुति वंदित राम 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 मैथिली नंदन राम 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 मारुति वंदित राम 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 जय राम 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 जय 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 राम 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 श्री रामचंद्र की जय।
नमस्कारं, मम नाम आर्वी। अद्य रावणं
विषयं वदिष्यामि। मया फलमूलजैः रावणं निर्मितः। अवश्यं जानामि कि रावणः शिवस्य अत्यन्तभक्तः आसीत्। रावणः अतिविशिष्ट वीणावादकः आसीत्। भारतवर्षे तथा श्रीलङ्कायां रावणः पूज्यते अनेकश्च स्थानः। दशमुखे रावणः मरणपूर्वकं लक्ष्मणाय मूल्यवान् ज्ञानं प्रददाति। अथ रावणकृत शिवताण्डवस्तोत्रम्। जटाटवीगलज्जलप्रवाहपावितस्थले गले विलम्ब्य लम्बितां भुजङ्गतुङ्गमालिकां डमड्डमड्डमड्डमड्डमन् निनादवद्दमर्वयं चकार चन्द्रताण्डवं तनोतु नः शिवम्। जटाकटाः सम्भ्रमभ्रमन्निलिम्पनिर्झरि विलोलवीचिवल्लरी विराजमानमूर्धनि धगद्धगद्धगज्ज्वलल्ललाटपट्टपावके किशोरचन्द्रशेखरे रते प्रतीक्षरं मम। धन्यवाद।
नमस्ते, मम नाम सिद्धान्तः। अहम् अर्वैन् नगरे वसामि। अहम् एतत् चित्रं चित्रितवान्। एतत् चित्रे श्रीरामः रावणेन सह युद्धं करोति। तौ सङ्ग्रामे स्तः। दशकल्कः रावणः रामं प्रति अस्त्राणि प्रहरति। तदा श्रीरामः रावणस्य नाभिं बाणं निपातयति। जय श्रीराम। धन्यवादः।
नमो नमः महर्षि विश्वामित्राय स्वागतम्।
आयुष्मान् भव। हे राजन्, अहं यागं करोमि। भवतः साहाय्यम् आवश्यकम्। यागसमये राक्षसी ताटका तस्याः पुत्रौ मारीच सुबाहु यागं भग्नं कुर्वन्ति।
अवश्यं, कृपया आज्ञां ददातु। मम सैन्यं प्रेषयिष्यामि।
न, भवतः पुत्रं रामं प्रेषयतु।
मम पुत्रः रामः 16 वर्षीयः अपि न। सः तु लघु बालकः। अहम् एव आगच्छामि।
अहं कुपितः। भवतः साहाय्यं मास्तु। गच्छामि।
तिष्ठतु महर्षि, प्रेषयिष्यामि। हे प्रिय राम, गच्छतु।
अस्तु, भवतः आज्ञां पालयामि। हे जनक, मा चिन्तयतु। अहमपि अग्रजेन सह गच्छामि। कौसल्या सुप्रजा रामपूर्वा सन्ध्या प्रवर्तते। उत्तिष्ठ नरशार्दूला, कर्तव्यं दैवमान्निकम्। अस्तु गुरुवर्य। अग्रज, पश्यतु, अत्र क्रूरमृगाः सन्ति। हे महाश्री, विचित्रं पश्यतु। प्रातःकाले हठात् आकाशः कृष्णवर्णः अभवत्। किमर्थम्? एतत् सर्वं ताटकामाय। हे राम, तत्र ताटकां पश्यतु। कथम् अहं स्त्रीमारिष्यामि? सः अधर्म खलु? सा साधारण स्त्री न, सा राक्षसी। सा जनान् पशून् च पीडयति। सा बालान् वृद्धान् च मारयति। अतः तस्याः संहारः धर्मः एव। अस्तु गुरुवर्य, किन्तु अहं तस्याः हस्तौ कर्तयामि। अग्रज, पश्यतु, तस्य हस्तौ पतितौ। अहं तस्याः नासिकां कर्णौ च कर्तयामि। लक्ष्मण तस्याः नासिकाकर्णौ च कर्तितवान्। विलम्बः मास्तु, सन्ध्यासमयः भविष्यति, मारयतु। तु गुरुवर्य। जय श्रीराम।
इदानीं वयम् एकं सुन्दरं नाटकं पश्यामः। तद् व्यासकक्षातः मीनाक्षी, अर्जुन्, अपि च मैत्रेयी लोपामुद्रा कक्षातः अनिरुद्धः, जयन्तः ते मिलित्वा एकं नाटकं कृतवन्तः। तद् इदानीं वयं पश्यामः।
हे मुनिवर्य, अहं ब्रह्मज्ञानम् इच्छामि। अहं भवतः शिष्या भवितुम् इच्छामि। कृपया मम शिष्यत्वं स्वीकरोतु।
अस्तु पुत्री, भवती मम आश्रमे एव वसतु। स्थानं स्वच्छं करोतु, सेवां करोतु। तद् भवत्याः हिताय भविष्यति। हे पुत्री, अहम् इदानीं वृद्धः। अहं देहत्यागं करोमि। किम् आवश्यकं, कृपया वदतु।
हे महर्षि, भवता विना मम जीवनं व्यर्थं। कृपया मामपि परमपदं नयतु।
न पुत्री, एकस्मिन् दिने भगवान् श्रीरामः आगमिष्यति। तावत्पर्यन्तं निरीक्षां करोतु। तदनन्तरं मम समीपम् आगन्तुं शक्नोति। परमपदं प्राप्स्यति।
अस्तु महर्षि।
हे लक्ष्मण, सीता कुत्र भवेत्? हे अग्रज, तत्र पश्यतु, शबर्याः आश्रमः तत्र पृच्छावः।
कः तत्र? श्रीरामः इव दृश्यते। साक्षात् रामलक्ष्मणौ आगतौ। अहो मम भाग्यं। स्वागतं सुस्वागतम्।
भवत्याः आश्रमं सुन्दरमस्ति।
तिष्ठतु, मधुराणि फलानि आनयामि। कृपया स्वीकरोतु।
हे अग्रज, एतत् दष्टं फलं किमर्थं खादति? न खादनीयं खलु? शबरी उत्तमा भक्ता अस्ति। सा फलानि दृष्ट्वा मधुरफलानि एव ददाति। हे शबरी, अहं प्रसन्नः अस्मि। किमिच्छति? पृच्छतु।
हे प्रभो, परमपदं गन्तुम् इच्छामि।
तथास्तु।
इर्वैन् केन्द्रस्य दूरवर्तिछात्राः सियाटल् नगरे वासिनः एकं रूपकम् अभिनयन्ति। एतत् रूपकं श्रीरामायणमहाकाव्यस्य बालकाण्डस्य पुत्रकामेष्टियज्ञदृश्यम् आधारित लघुरूपकं। पश्यतु, आनन्दयतु।
एतत् राजा दशरथस्य आस्थानम्।
कोसलाराज्यस्य राजा इक्ष्वाकुवंशकुलतिलकः राजा दशरथः आगच्छति। राज्ञी कौसल्या आगच्छति। मन्त्रि, सर्वं कुशलं वा?
आम्, सर्वं कुशलम्। अद्य कुलगुरु वसिष्ठः अयोध्या नगरम् आगच्छति।
अति उत्तमम्। प्रिय कौसल्ये, अद्य प्रभाते कुत्र गतवती? अद्य अहं सरयूनद्याः तीरे अटितवती। कैकेयी अपि आगतवती। सुमित्रा न आगतवती। सूर्योदयः सुन्दरः आसीत्। भवतः बहु उत्सुकः अस्ति। गुरुवसिष्ठस्य आगमनार्थं वा? आम्, अहं गुरुवसिष्ठस्य आगमनम् अपेक्षामि। कुलगुरुः, कुलपुरोहितः, राजगुरुः, वेदवरेण्यः, योगवरेण्यः, ब्रह्मर्षि वसिष्ठः आगच्छति। सुस्वागतं। नमो नमः। सुस्वागतं। भवतः आगमनात् वयं सन्तुष्टाः अभवन्। नमो नमः।
नमो नमः। सर्वं मङ्गलं भवतु। सर्वं कुशलं वा?
आम्, सर्वं कुशलं, परन्तु अहं किञ्चित् चिन्तामग्नः अस्मि।
भवान् किमर्थं चिन्तामग्नः अस्ति? कोसलाराज्यः भारते विराजते इति जानामि। तत्तु भयं नास्ति। भवान् समर्थः, उत्तमः, धर्मज्ञः राजा च। किमर्थं चिन्ता? भवान् किमिच्छति?
आम्, सर्वमस्ति, परन्तु मम सन्तानं नास्ति। अहं वंशस्य वृद्धिमिच्छामि।
चिन्ता मास्तु। पुत्रकामेष्टियज्ञं करोतु। भवान् पुत्रं प्राप्नोति। सर्वं कुशलं भवति।
धन्यवादः गुरुवर्य। अहं भवतः सूचनाम् अनुसरामि।
तावत् अहम् आगच्छामि। सर्वे जनाः सुखिनो भवन्तु।
धन्योऽस्तु। धन्यवादाः गुरुवर्य। राजा दशरथः पुत्रकामेष्टियज्ञं कर्तुं सिद्धं करोति। एतत् पुत्रकामेष्टियज्ञशाला। ॐ सहना भवतु, सहनौ भुनक्तु, सह वीर्यं करवावहै, तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। देव सन्तुष्ट अभवत्। एतं दिव्यपायसं स्वीकरोतु। एतं पत्नीभ्यः ददातु। भवान् पुत्रान् प्राप्नोति। राजा दशरथः दिव्यपायसं पत्नीभ्यः ददाति। तत्कारणात् राजा दशरथस्य 4 पुत्राः जन्मं प्राप्नुवन्ति। देवी कौसल्यायाः पुत्रः श्रीरामः, देवी कैकेय्याः पुत्रः भरतः, देवी सुमित्रायाः पुत्रौ लक्ष्मणः शत्रुघ्नः च। ताः आनन्देन पुत्रान् पालयन्ति। धन्यवादः।
एतत् रूपकं श्रीरामायणमहाकाव्यस्य वनवासप्रस्थानदृश्यम् आधारित लघुरूपकं। छात्रः एव एतत् रूपकम् इंग्लिश भाषायां लिखित्वा गूगल ट्रान्स्लेट् कृत्वा अध्यापिकया सम्पादनं कारयित्वा लिखितवन्तः। पश्यतु, आनन्दयतु।
तव पुत्रस्य भरतस्य अपि भविष्यत् चिन्तयामि। यदि रामः राजा भविष्यति तर्हि भरतः सदैव तस्य दासः भविष्यति।
भवती मूढा अस्ति किम्? रामः अपि मम पुत्रः एव। सः भरतेन सदृशः मम प्रियः अस्ति।
अहं मूढा न, भवती मुग्धा अस्ति। भवती महाराजस्य प्रिया भार्या, तस्मात् सर्वे त्वाम् आदर्यन्ते। यदि रामः राजा भविष्यति तदा तस्य प्रजाजनानां च निष्ठा कौसल्यां प्रति भवति। भवती भवत्याः पुत्रः च उपेक्षितो भविष्यतः।
एवम्, अहं मूर्खा अस्मि, परन्तु अहम् इदानीं किं कर्तुं शक्नोमि?
14 वर्षाणि यावत् रामं वनवासयतु। भरतस्य राज्याभिषेकं कारयतु।
कथं?
स्मरतु, अनेकेभ्यः वर्षेभ्यः पूर्वं भवती युद्धे दशरथं रक्षितवती। सः भवत्यै वरद्वयं दत्तवान्। तयोः उपयोगं करोतु।
कथं दशरथं प्रबोधयामि?
दशरथः सत्यनिष्ठः अस्ति। सः निश्चयेन वरद्वयम् अनुमन्स्यते।
किमर्थं रोदिषि? अद्य शुभदिनमस्ति। भवत्याः इच्छा का? भवान् यथा प्रतिज्ञातवान् तथा मां वरद्वयम् अनुमन्यताम्। यथा भवती जानाति अहं प्रतिज्ञाबद्धः अस्मि। वदतु, भवती किम् इच्छति? प्रथमवरात् अहं रामं 14 वर्षाणि यावत् वनवासं प्रेषयितुम् इच्छामि। द्वितीयवरात् अहं भरतस्य राज्याभिषेकं कारयितुम् इच्छामि, न तु रामस्य। भवती कथम् एतादृशी कुटिला स्वाचिनी च सञ्जाता?
इतः भवान् किमर्थं दुःखी अस्ति? भवतः माता भवतं वक्तुम् इच्छति।
पुरा देवासुरसङ्ग्रामे अहं महाराजं दशरथं रक्षितवती। तेन प्रसन्नः भूत्वा भवतः पिता महाराजः दशरथः मह्यं वरद्वयं दत्तवान्। तेनैव अहं भवन्तं 14 वर्षाणि यावत् वनवासं प्रेषयितुम् इच्छामि। भरतस्य राज्याभिषेकं कारयितुं च इच्छामि।
निश्चयेन मातः, भवत्याः इच्छा मम आज्ञा एव। अहं वनवासं प्रति गच्छामि। लक्ष्मणं सूचयामि सर्वान् सेवकानिति। अहं भवता सह चर्चयितुम् इच्छामि।
भ्राता, किं वक्तुम् इच्छसि?
कैकेयी मां प्रवासं प्रेषयितुम् इच्छामि। भरतः राजा भवत इति अपि इच्छति।
निच्छुस्ति, अहं तं वदामि। सा तथा कथं कर्तुं शक्यते?
तथा मा कुरु। सा सर्वदा अस्माकं माता इति मा विस्मर।
अस्तु, भवान् तदेव इच्छति चेत् अहम् अपि भवान् सह वनवासं स्वीकरोमि।
न, भवान् युवा अस्ति। अपि च अस्माकं मातापितॄणां च पालनं भवतः कर्तव्यं। तान् सर्वान् सेवताम्।
अहं तव छाया, त्वया विना न जीवामि।
अस्तु, गच्छावः। अहं सीतां सूचयामि। अहं लक्ष्मणः च वनं गच्छतः।
अहम् अपि ताभ्यां सह वनं गमिष्यामि।
अस्माकं मातापितॄणां च सेवा भवत्याः कर्तव्यम्। अपि च बहूनि कष्टानि भविष्यन्ति। भवती कथं सहिष्यते?
भवान् अस्ति किल? यत्र भवान् अस्ति तत्र अहं सुरक्षिताः। भवतः सह गमनं मम प्रथमदायकं सौभाग्यं च।
यदि तदेव इच्छसि तर्हि मया आगन्तुं शक्नोषि।
नमस्ते, अहं संस्कृतभारत्याः एकस्य छात्रस्य माता अस्मि। अहमपि संस्कृतं पठामि। ज्येष्ठेभ्यः बन्धुभगिनीभ्यः प्रेरणां प्राप्य सियाटल् नगरे वासिनः लघुबालकाः अपि एकं रूपकम् अभिनयन्ति। एते बालकाः इदानीं संस्कृतभारत्याः छात्राः न, परन्तु निश्चयेन संस्कृतं पठितुम् उत्सुकाः सन्ति। रूपकस्य नाम अस्ति सीतायाः अन्वेषणं। पश्यन्तु।
विभीषणस्य गृहे सीता माता कुत्र अस्ति? सीता अशोकवने अस्ति। अशोकवने। मम कः? मम नाम हनुमानः। एषा रामस्य मृत्युः। हे राम, शीघ्रम् आगच्छतु। नमस्ते, मम नाम आर्ना। नमस्ते, मम नाम जानकी। नमस्ते, मम नाम अस्मि। नमस्ते, मम नाम धरित्री। नमस्ते, मम नाम अनन्या। नमस्ते, मम नाम अनिरुद्धा। नमस्ते, मम नाम ध्रुवः। नमस्ते, मम नाम अभयः। नमस्ते, मम नाम कवीरः। नमस्ते, मम नाम पार्थः।
श्रीराम जय राम जय जय राम। श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। नमः सर्वेभ्यः। मम नाम सरोजा। अहम् इर्वैन् बालकेन्द्रे चतुर्थस्तर कक्षां पाठयामि। रामो विग्रहवान् धर्मः। अस्माकं सौभाग्यमस्ति संस्कृतभारती बालकेन्द्रस्य छात्राः संक्षेपरामायणं वर्षद्वयं यावत् पठन्तः सन्ति। अद्य ते रामायणतः मम प्रियकथा नाम्ना प्रदर्शनीं कर्तुम् इच्छुकाः सन्ति। इदानीं प्रदर्शनानि पश्यामः। Namaste everyone. My name is Saroja. I teach Sanskritam at Irvine Balakendra. We are very fortunate to learn and teach Sankshepa Ramayana to all the students. Today, students would like to present their favorite character and story from Ramayana. Hope you all enjoy the presentation. Dhanyavadaha. Jaitu Samskritam.
Namaskara everyone. Mama nama Sanvi Gautam Salgar. Ramayanataha mama priya patraha Rama. The qualities I like about Rama is how he is loyal, sincere, and a great protector. Rama Vigrahavan Dharmaha. Meaning, he is the personification of Dharma. Dharma in his words, actions, and thinking. I also like Rama for his noble deeds and how he is never selfish. Here is the story that I like about Rama. King Janaka had officially announced that he would marry his daughter to the person who could string the pinaka, Lord Shiva's bow. As Rama stopped by, he effortlessly strung the pinaka and unintentionally broke it a few moments later. He was rewarded Sita. As he broke the bow, it sounded like thunder and lightning. Here is the shloka I like about Rama. Prajapati samashriman dhata ripunishudanaha rakshita jivalokasya dharmasya parirakshita. Meaning, auspicious like Brahma, Rama is the sustainer of this world, destroyer of these enemies, and protector of us beings and the moral code. Dhanyavada.
Namaste. Mama nama Vijayah. Ramayanatāh mama priyapatraha Ramah. My favorite character from the Ramayana is Rama. I like his dedication, honesty, and forgiveness. I believe his episode with Shurpanakha brings these qualities forward in a way that you can understand it. But before I go into detail, here is the part of the Ramayana I have so earnestly been talking about. Rama, Sita and Lakshmana, now in exile, are in their hut at Dandakaranyam, in their garden doing some work or other. Nearby in the bushes, a Rakshasi named Shurpanakha sees Rama from afar.
She is smitten by his big, broad shoulders and handsome looks, and immediately assumes the form of a beautiful woman. She walks up to Rama and asks him for his hand in marriage. Rama replies no, saying that he is already married, referring to Sita. And he also adds, noticing the look on Shurpanakha's face, pointing to Lakshmana, that is Lakshmana. He is equally handsome and also available. You may go to him. Shurpanakha goes to Lakshmana for Lakshmana's hand in marriage. Lakshmana says, I am a servant of Rama and servants cannot marry. So please go to Rama. Shurpanakha gets very angry as she is rejected by both. She tries to kill Sita so that Rama will accept her. But she is cut short by Lakshmana, who with a swift movement of his arm chops off her nose. Shurpanakha runs away, howling with pain. The story portrays Rama's dedication first when he stays loyal to Sita, even when a beautiful woman walks up to him and asks him for his hand in marriage. Any common man would be smitten by this attitude, but Rama was not. He was unshaken in his resolve. It also shows his strong connection with Sita, for he did not even take in Shurpanakha as a second wife. Lastly, this story shows his forgiveness. Because even when Lakshmana wanted to hurt her even more or kill her, because she tried to kill Sita, Rama stopped him, saying that she was a woman. This shows that Rama is very forgiving, even if somebody tried to do something personal. Thank you. I will end this presentation with a sloka. Vishnuna sadrusho virye somavat priyadarshanah kalagni sadrshakrodhe sakshamaya prithvi samah. Sri Rama is like Vishnu in prowess, the moon in pleasing appearance, the all-consuming fire in anger, the earth in patience, Kubera in charity, and the sun in steadfastness. Thank you. These are the reasons why I like Rama, along with his dedication and forgiveness, which I mentioned earlier. Dhanyavadaha punarmidamaha. May all of you have a good day.
Namaste. Rama Navami. My favorite character from Ramayana is Lakshmana, and the qualities I like in Lakshmana is that he's very, very devoted to Rama, and he's also very protective of his family and friends. Lakshmana is also very thoughtful since he builds a hut for Rama and Sita, but not himself. He's also very humble because he thinks of himself as a mere servant of Rama and never is proud or brags about himself in the stories. And I would like to adopt these qualities, and I like them because, first of all, being devoted to God is very important and good since it helps you with struggles in life and you find a peace of mind. And being thoughtful shows how much you care about the well-being of others, and protectiveness of your family and friends shows how much you want them to stay safe. And being humble is also very important since it shows that you aren't arrogant or pride, and Lakshmana was never arrogant or pride. He just thought he should serve Rama since Rama is his god and brother. Lakshmana was the brother of Rama in Ayodhya, and there they lived with their two other brothers, Bharat and Shatrugna. When Rama went to exile for 14 years in the forest, Lakshmana implored to go with him since in the palace without Rama it would be hell, but in the forest with Rama it would be heaven. So Rama decided to take Sita and Lakshmana with him. And there, Lakshmana served Rama and Sita to the best of his ability, and he made a hut for them, and he served them day and night, not caring a bit about himself. And in the war, Lakshman wanted to help Rama at all costs and make sure that no harm comes to him. Even though he knows that Rama could handle it, he wants to make sure his brother gets the best. And I would like to say a shloka about Lakshmana from Samskritabharathi. Tam vrajantam priyo bhrata Lakshmano nujagamaha sneha vinaya sampanna sumitranandavardhanaha. This means that Lakshmana is the brother of Rama and he's endowed with modesty as the enhancer and joy of his mother Sumitra. This shows how much Lakshman loves Rama because he goes to the forest with him, not caring a bit about him. Dhanyavadaha.
Namaste. Mama Nama Anishaha. Ramayanataha mama priyapatraha Ravanaha. Ravana. I'm sure you must have heard this name as he is the well-known villain of the Adikavya Ramayana. Though he might have been very cruel, did you know he had a lot of good qualities? The first one being his die-hard devotion to Lord Shiva. Ravana was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. He performed many tapasyas in praise of the Lord. Did you know Ravana also wrote the famous Shiva Tandava Stotra? I'm sure some of you must have heard this. It goes like this. Jata kata hasam brahma brahman nilimpa nirjari vilola vichi vallari virajamana murdhani, and so on. Well, Ravana was not only a great devotee of Lord Shiva, he was also a very knowledgeable scholar. Ravana was the great grandson of Brahma himself. He had knowledge of all 4 Vedas. That's a lot of content. Ravana was not only a knowledgeable scholar, he was also a very talented musician. And of course, he was a super skilled warrior. No wonder Lord Rama took 10 days to finish him off. Whoa! I never saw Ravana in this perspective. I learned a lot of stuff by writing this essay about him, and I hope you did too. I would like to end my presentation by saying a stotra from the Sanskshita Ramayana. Na virodho balavata kshamo ravanate nate anadrityatu tadvakyam ravana kalachoditaha. The meaning is, Maricha tried several times to warn Ravana, saying, Ravana, rivalry with the brave Lord Rama is not appropriate of you. But Ravana, impelled by his own fate, ignored Maricha's words and marched off to Rama's hermitage. Dhanyavadaha.
Namaskaraha. Mama Nama Ananya. Mama Ramayanaha Priyapatra Shabari. The qualities I like about Shabari is Bhakti and Nirikshana. Shabari is a tribal girl. She always had faith in God and in her guru Matanga Maharshi. She also lived with her guru in his ashrama, which was at the foot of Rishyamukha Parvata and Paschimam banks of Pampa Nadi. When Matanga Maharshi was about to leave to Swargaloka, he advised Shabari to continue her tapas till Rama comes to her ashrama. So with that, Shabari had faith in God and in her guru's words that Rama will come one day. Shabari waited for several varshas. Pratidinam, she thinks that today is the day Rama will come to her ashrama. She wakes up early, cleans the ashrama, gets fresh water, phalam, pushpa, and is ready to offer to Rama. Finally, when Rama came, Shabari with her utmost devotion made sure Rama got the most sweetest black plums. She offers pushpa and phalam and does puja to Rama. Rama makes her join her guru in Swargaloka. I would like to recite the following shloka about Shabari in Sankshepa Ramayana. Shabariya pujita samyagramo dasharathatmajaha pampatire hanumata sangato vanarenaha. Rama, the son of Dasharatha, destroyer of enemies and possessing great splendor, approached Shabari, who duly worshipped him. On the bank of Pampa, he met a monkey named Hanuman, on whose advice he made friendship with Sugriva. Dhanyavadaha.
Namaste. Mama Nama Anupaha. रामायणतः मम प्रियपात्रः विभीषणः। अश्वत्थामा बलिर्व्यासो हनुमांश्च विभीषणः कृपा परशुरामश्च सप्तैते चिरञ्जीविनः। सप्तचिरञ्जीविषु विभीषणः एकः अस्ति। विभीषणः रावणस्य अनुजः। सः धर्मज्ञः, सत्यवाक्, विवेकी, आदरणीयः च। सः राक्षसः भूत्वा अपि स्वस्य शक्तीनाम् उपयोगः धर्माय एव करोति, न तु स्वार्थाय। धर्मस्य कृते सः स्वस्य अग्रजम् एव विरोधीकृतवान्। युद्धपूर्वं रावणम् उपदेशितवान् यत् रामस्य शक्तिः अधिका अस्ति, अतः सीतां त्यजतु इति। रावणः न अङ्गीकरोति, विभीषणं तर्जयति। विभीषणः रावणं त्यक्त्वा रामं प्रति गच्छति। सः युद्धे रामस्य साहाय्यं करोति। रामः रावणं मारयति। नन्तरं दुःखितः विभीषणः अग्रजस्य अन्तिमसंस्कारं करोति। रामः विभीषणस्य पट्टाभिषेकं करोति। विभीषणः लङ्कायाः राजा भवति। अद्य अपि केचन जनाः लङ्कायां विभीषणं पूजयन्ति। वयम् अपि विभीषणः इव धर्मम् आचरामः। संक्षेपरामायणे एकः श्लोकः अस्ति। अभिषिच्य च लङ्कायां राक्षसेन्द्रं विभीषणं कृतकृत्यस्तदा रामः विज्वरः प्रमुमोदः। लङ्कायां विभीषणस्य अभिषेकं कृत्वा रामः सर्वेषां सन्तोषं कृतवान्। धन्यवादः।
एकस्मिन् वने व्याधः रत्नाकरः वसति स्म। यात्रिकाः वनं गच्छति स्म। तदा रत्नाकरः तेषां धनं चोरयति स्म। एकस्मिन् दिने नारदमहर्षिः वनम् आगच्छति स्म। नारायण नारायण। स्थगतु, भवतः धनं ददातु, नो चेत् अहं भवन्तं मारयामि। व्याधः, भवान् हिंसां चौर्यं च करोति। भवान् पापकर्मं करोति। भवतः कुटुम्बजनाः धनेन सह पापं स्वीक्रियते वा? अनन्तरं रत्नाकरः कुटुम्बजनानां पापमपि स्वीकुर्वन्ति वा इति पृच्छति। कोऽपि पापं स्वीकर्तुं न सिद्धाः। अहं पापं करोमि वा? अहं नरकं गच्छामि वा? तदा राम राम इति रामजपं करोतु। अस्तु। राम 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 इति रत्नाकरस्य कथा। रत्नाकरः तेन कारणेन तस्य शरीरम् आवृत्य वल्मीकः उत्पद्यते स्म। तदनन्तरं रत्नाकरः वाल्मीकिमहर्षिः अभवत्। वाल्मीकिमहर्षिः नारदमहर्षिं पृच्छति स्म। नारदमहर्षि, कोऽन्वस्मिन् साम्प्रतं लोके गुणवान् कश्च वीर्यवान् धर्मज्ञश्च कृतज्ञश्च सत्यवाक्यो दृढव्रतः चारित्रेण च को युक्तः सर्वभूतेषु को हितः विद्वान् कः समर्थश्च
कश्चैकप्रियदर्शनः आत्मवान् को जितः क्रोधः द्युतिमान् को न सूयकः कश्च बिभ्यति देवाश्च जातरोषस्य संयुगे एतदिच्छाम्यहं श्रोतुं परं कौतूहलं हि मे महर्षे त्वं समर्थोऽसि ज्ञातुमेवं विधं नरम्।
बहु सम्यक् आसीत् खलु? धन्यवादः।
रामनामस्मरणं प्रतिदिनं करणीयम् एव, किन्तु रामनवमी दिने विशेषतः रामस्मरणं श्रेष्ठम् अस्ति। मार्च 25 तमे दिने प्रचलिते संस्कृतगोष्ठी कार्यक्रमे अस्माकं केन्द्रस्य छात्राः शिक्षकाः च संक्षेपरामायणस्य पारायणं कृतवन्तः। मार्च 18 तमे दिने सियाटल् केन्द्रे अपि पारायणं कृतवन्तः। तयोः दृश्ये इदानीं पश्यामः। आगच्छन्तु।
बुद्धिमान् नीतिमान् वाग्मी श्रीमान् शत्रुनिबर्हणः विपुलांसो महाबाहुः कम्बुग्रीवो महाहनुः महोरस्को महेश्वासः गूढशत्रुरविन्दमः यशस्वी ज्ञानसम्पन्नः शुचिर्वचः समाधिमान् प्रजापतिः श्रीमान् रक्षिता जीवलोकस्य धर्मस्य परिरक्षिता रक्षिता स्वस्य धर्मस्य स्वजनस्य च रक्षिता वेदवेदाङ्गतत्त्वज्ञः धनुर्वेदे च निष्ठितः सर्वशास्त्रार्थतत्त्वज्ञः स्मृतिवान् प्रतिभानवान् सर्वलोकप्रियः साधुः अमीनात्मा विचक्षणः सर्वदाभिगतः सद्भिः समुद्र इव सिन्धुभिः आर्यः सर्वसमश्चैव सदैव प्रियदर्शनः स च सर्वगुणोपेतः नारदं परिपप्रच्छ लोके गुणवान् कश्च वीर्यवान् धर्मज्ञश्च कृतज्ञश्च सत्यवाक्यो दृढव्रतः चारित्रेण चोरुकः सर्वभूतेषु मोहितः विद्वान् कः समर्थश्च कश्चैकप्रियदर्शनः आत्मावान् को जितक्रोधः द्युतिमान् को न सूयकः।
We are in an argument. Kartayati is a word or not? Kartayati. Oh, wait. Jai Shri Ram. 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 They are mad.
एतत् आसीत् अस्माकं केन्द्रस्य राममेला कार्यक्रमः। Thank you for watching and encouraging our kids. धन्यवादः।
यः पृथ्वी भरवारणाय दिविजैः सम्प्रार्थितश्चिन्मयः सञ्जातः पृथिवीतले रविकुले माया मनुष्यो व्ययः निश्चक्रं हतराक्षसः पुनरगात् ब्रह्मत्वमाद्यं स्थिरां कीर्तिं पापहरां विधाय जगतां तं जानकीशं भजे विश्वोद्भवस्थितिलयादिषु हेतुमेकं मायाश्रयं विगतमायमचिन्त्यमूर्तिम् आनन्दसान्द्रममलं निजबोधरूपं सीतापतिं विदिततत्त्वमहं नमामि। नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अत्र कैलिफोर्निया प्रान्ते प्रशान्तमहासागरस्य तटे वयम् उपविष्टाः। अहो भाग्यम्, अहो आश्चर्यम्, अहो वैचित्र्यम्, अहो वैशिष्ट्यं यत् इदानीम् अत्र भारतस्य दर्शनं तु अस्ति एव, किञ्च विद्यमान वर्तमान भारतस्य इत्येव न, अपि तु प्राचीनस्य अत्युन्नतस्य सुसंस्कृतस्य भारतस्य दर्शनम् अत्र जायमानमस्ति इति अहो आश्चर्यम्। अभिनन्दनीयाः एते सर्वे अत्रत्याः आचार्याः, तथैव अन्तेवासिनः शिष्याः। कालप्रवाहः कुत्र गच्छन् अस्ति इति निरूपयितुम् एतत् अत्युत्तमम् उदाहरणं। प्रायः वयं पश्यामः इदानीं कालः अन्यत्र प्रवहदस्ति इति, किञ्च अत्र दर्शनेन ज्ञायते कालस्य प्रवाहः संस्कृतं प्रति, भारतं प्रति, संस्कृतिं प्रति, धर्मं प्रति जायमानः अस्ति। एषः सर्वोऽपि परमेश्वरस्य महान् अनुग्रहः। इतः पूर्वम् अत्र अनेके बालाः आगत्य स्वकीयां कलां प्रदर्शितवन्तः, गीतानि श्रावितवन्तः, संवादम् अपि श्रावितवन्तः। ते सर्वेपि बालाः अभिनन्दनीयाः। सर्वे बालाः संस्कृतं जानन्ति वा? अस्तु, उत्तमम्। अत्र आगत्य संस्कृतभाषणस्य, संस्कृतश्रवणस्य अवकाशः इति अहो आश्चर्यम्। तदर्थं या प्रीतिः, या श्रद्धा, यत् समर्पणं, ये च श्रमाः ते न सामान्याः। बहूनां सुखानां त्यागं कृत्वा अत्र एते आचार्याः, एताः शिक्षिकाः अहोरात्रं संस्कृतमयं जीवनं जीवन्तः सर्वान् संस्कृतं कुर्वन्तः सन्ति। वस्तुतः अद्य तेषां पूजनम् अर्चनम् अभिनन्दनम् अभिवन्दनम् अस्माभिः सर्वैः मिलित्वा कर्तव्यं। कृपया सर्वे अत्र ये आचार्याः शिक्षकाः तेषां कृते अभिनन्दनानि कुर्वन्तु। अविस्मरणीयम् एतत् सर्वम्। अस्तु, प्रसङ्गेऽस्मिन् बालानां कृते बालकाः कृपया अत्र पश्यन्तु। एकां कथां वदामि। कथाम् इच्छन्ति वा बालकाः? तर्हि एकां कथां श्रावयामि। सर्वे रामभक्ताः खलु? उत्तमं। तर्हि रामायणस्य बालकाण्डस्य प्रथमं सर्गं सर्वे पठितवन्तः। 100 श्लोकाः, तपस्वाध्यायनिरतम् इत्यादयः। तस्मिन्नेव बालकाण्डे बह्व्यः कथाः सन्ति, जानन्ति वा? तत्रत्याम् एकां कथां वदामि। सा कथा हरिश्चन्द्रस्य जीवनकथा। हरिश्चन्द्रः इति नाम स्मर्यते वा? हरिश्चन्द्रं जानन्ति वा? हरिश्चन्द्रः इति इक्ष्वाकुवंशे रामस्य पूर्वजः। अवगच्छति वा? हरिश्चन्द्रस्य पुत्रः आसीत् रोहितः इति। हरिश्चन्द्रस्य पुत्रः कः? रोहितः। एकदा किं जातं? रोहितः गृहं त्यक्त्वा वनं गतवान्। कथा बहु विस्तीर्णा कथा अस्ति, अहं संक्षेपेण वदामि। रोहितः वनं गतवान्। रोहितस्य वनगमनानन्तरं तस्य पिता हरिश्चन्द्रः चिन्तया शोकेन दुःखितः, ततश्च रोगग्रस्तः अभवत्। हरिश्चन्द्रस्य जलरोगः आसीत्, जलोदरः इति। नाम उदरे जलं पूर्णं भवति, तथापि तृष्णा भवति। जलपानेन तृष्णाशान्तिः न भवति। तस्य रोगस्य नाम किं? सर्वे जानन्ति वा? अस्तु, सः रोगग्रस्तः आसीत्। तत्सर्वं रोहितः अरण्ये ज्ञातवान्। मम पिता रोगग्रस्तः अस्ति, सः मदर्थम् अत्यन्तं चिन्तां कुर्वन् अस्ति, दुःखितः अस्ति। मया पुनः गृहं गन्तव्यमेव। तस्य गृहं नाम हरिश्चन्द्रस्य गृहं। हरिश्चन्द्रः राजा। कुत्र अस्ति हरिश्चन्द्र राजा? अयोध्यानगरे। सत्यं खलु? तर्हि सः रोहितः अयोध्यां गन्तुम् आरब्धवान्। मध्ये मार्गे इन्द्रः एकस्य मनुष्यस्य रूपं कृत्वा तं बोधयति, रोहितं बोधयति। अरे रोहित, गृहं गत्वा किं करोति? अरण्ये एव वसतु। अरण्यवासस्य अनेके लाभाः भवन्ति। तत्र अरण्यवासस्य लाभाः कथं सन्ति इति इन्द्रः 5 वारम् उक्तवान्। एकवारं वदति, चरन् वै मधुविन्दति, चरन् स्वादु मुदुम्बरं, सूर्यस्य पश्य श्रेमाणं, यो न तन्द्रयते चरन् चरैवेति चरैवेति। पुनः द्वितीयवारं वदति, कलिशयानो भवति, सञ्जिहानस्तु द्वापरः, उत्तिष्ठं स्त्रेता भवति कृतं सम्पद्यते चरन् चरैवेति चरैवेति अस्य तात्पर्यम् अवगच्छन्ति वा वदामि वा चरन्वै मधुविन्दति यदि सञ्चरति इतस्ततः तर्हि मधु उत्तमान् पदार्थान् प्राप्नोति यथा सूर्यः निरन्तरं सञ्चरति गगनतलं प्राचीतः आरभ्य पश्चिमपर्यन्तं निरन्तरं सञ्चरति कदापि न विश्रमति तथा यः सञ्चरति तस्य जीवनम् उत्तमं भवति तस्मात् सञ्चर सञ्चर चरैवेति चरैवेति एकस्मिन् पर्याये एवम् आदिष्टवान् द्वितीये पर्याये वदति यदि गृहं गच्छति किं करोति सुखेन निद्राति सुखनिद्रा इत्यस्य अर्थः कः कलियुगं कनिशयानो भवति
Namaste. Well, it was a real pleasure to be at the Samskritabharathi Irvine Kendram event on Saturday. It was a pleasure to see all the events that the kids put together, to meet so many people who are passionate about Sanskrit, about what it means, why we study it, and why we make it a part of our lives. I was especially inspired because I didn't quite grow up with the Sanskrit community like all of you did. Most of my Sanskrit learning was done on my own, mainly through books or self-study, and what knowledge I have has mainly come through that process. So I think it's something very special that you all have a community of people you can talk to connect with, to understand this language and what it means. And what I would like to talk about here is, why is it that we study Sanskrit? What is the value of it that it really has? Why is it something that we do in this high-tech world that we live in? And I don't know the answer to that, because the answer that you have must come from yourself. All I can really tell you is why I study Sanskrit, why I love it, and why it's something that I care about deeply. And to do that, I'd like to just tell you a story. It's going to be my story about how I grew up, why I started learning this language, how I fell in love with it, and the important problems and challenges and opportunities that there are for Sanskrit going forward in our new world. So let me start with how I started studying Sanskrit. Here's another picture of me as a kid. As you can probably tell from my accent, I was born and raised in the United States, and actually my childhood home in California is still the one that I'm living in to this day. I grew up as a normal American kid. The things that I was interested in as a kid were stuffed animals and pizza parties, and growing up, it was Nintendo games with my friends, playing clarinet in the school band, watching cartoons like SpongeBob, and then as I got older, studying for the SATs, getting ready for college and everything that had to go into that. In many ways, my upbringing was a normal American childhood with my friends and playing outside. But there were things that kept me strongly anchored in my Indian culture and in my family. The first, of course, were family visits. This is my grandmother's house in Bangalore, and although it's an old photo, I have very fond memories of being here, of spending time with her and my relatives in India. Those trips gave me a really strong connection to where it is that my family comes from, why it is that we have the traditions that we have. The second as well were regular classes at the Chinmay mission program that we had. It was every Sunday about 20 minutes from our house. And I didn't do these for a very long time, maybe until I was about 10 or 11 or so. But just having some regular contact with an Indian community was really valuable for me. I didn't really fully understand all the things we were doing. A lot of it were stuff that my parents told me to do. But looking back on it now, I can say this was very important, just to have some kind of base level understanding of where it is that I come from. And then last but not least were actually comic books. I really loved reading different Amrachitrakatha comics growing up. The Ramayanam series in particular was a lot of fun for me. And through these, I learned about not only the different stories of my culture, but also just different aspects of India and Indian life. For someone like me who loved comic books, read the asterisk comics that my dad would buy, or other comics that I would see online, it was a great source of fun, and even as now, to go back through some of these volumes and read these stories through this way. I kept that level of connection with roughly being Indian for most of my life. We spoke only English at home, but it was through these ways that I had some connection to this culture. And it was when I was 19 or 20 or so that I started learning Sanskrit. And the story is quite funny. I was actually learning Japanese, an entirely different language, but then I realized as a vegetarian, going to Japan might be a little bit difficult. So I was looking for a different language to learn and saw a book kind of like this one on my dad's bookshelf. And I just poked around through it, and something about the language just really clicked with me, and I wanted to learn more. My father grew up in a pretty strict family, and he didn't like pushing us kids into anything we didn't want to do. But he did see this interest in Sanskrit that I had, and although he didn't push us kids into dance or music or anything like that, he did buy a couple of Sanskrit textbooks for me. And this was one of the great lucky strokes in my life, because in 2 weeks I went through the textbooks that he bought, and after those 2 weeks I was reading the Gita on my own. And when I say reading, I'm exaggerating a bit, because there's only so much Sanskrit you can learn in 2 weeks. But I could go through verse by verse. I memorized large portions of it and would think about it when I was walking around. And this was a really profound moment for me to understand and connect to this text that had been in the background of my life for so long. And not just the Gita, of course, but any Sanskrit shloka. I mean, we grew up chanting these things that we're told to chant, and it sounds interesting and it sounds nice, but it doesn't really mean much. But it was a profound moment to me to realize that I could understand these texts on their own terms, connect with them, and understand them as a piece of content like any other. And it was the first time I really felt deeply connected to this 1,000-year-old tradition that I was born into. So from here, my knowledge and familiarity with Sanskrit started to grow. One of the first projects that I made was this website called learnsanskrit.org. And I made it because I just didn't see good resources online at the time for learning and teaching Sanskrit. And I wanted to create something for people who are in the same position as me, learning on their own. Thankfully, now we live in a much stronger era with richer digital technologies available for people learning Sanskrit. But at the time, at least for me, I couldn't find very much. In addition, as I was learning Sanskrit and going through university, I started connecting what I was learning to different languages. With the inspiration and encouragement of a friend, I started learning Greek, and I was astonished and delighted to find all kinds of interesting connections between the Greek language that I saw and certain themes in Greek literature to things I was seeing in Sanskrit, not only in the language, but also in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And it was very profound for me. Even now, these lines that you see here, which are the first 7 lines of the Iliad, are lines that I know by heart, and likewise for other parts of Greek literature as well. In addition, by learning this language that's so ancient, has so many ties to others, I started developing this deeper perspective of language in general. And this is a kind of an arcane taste to have, I suppose, but it was very cool to me to see that all these different English words had roots that were connected to other languages and older languages. And then if you follow these further and further back, you find these deep connections. Here in this image on the left, you see all of these English words like generate and genius and native, all connected to the same root. And in the same way, I started seeing these connections between Greek and Sanskrit and English and German and Latin. And it was just incredibly profound to realize that the language that we speak and the language that we think with is thousands of years old and has come through the hands of many people who were all working with and tweaking the language in their own way. And likewise, I would spend hours on websites like etymonline.com learning about the stories of all the different words that I would speak and the connections between them. At this time, I also got further into meditation and spent a lot of time there. And of course, modern meditation, as it's practiced especially in the West, has deep roots in Indian culture and in Sanskrit and languages related to Sanskrit. In particular, well, I'll come back to that point in a second. At the same time, I was also diving deeper into Sanskrit grammar. I know not everyone loves grammar, but for me, it was just a lot of fun. I loved seeing the structure of this language and how you encode that structure. I would spend hours when I was in undergrad spending time in the library stacks, going through the bookshelves, reading commentaries on the Ashtadhyayi and understanding what it is that these rules are and how the ancient Indian people thought about language and about Sanskrit in particular. I also saw these connections to other languages related to Sanskrit. What you see here is the Pali language, which is the language of a lot of Buddhist text and Buddhist scripture. And I thought it was really cool that if you squint a little bit and if you know some Sanskrit, you can kind of make your way through a text like this and understand what it means. And this really broadened my perspective of Sanskrit. I'll come back to that theme in a moment, but I had this idea that Sanskrit was very much just a Hindu thing, only for stotrams and bhajans and Ramayanam, and that's about it. And it is that, and that's very valuable. But I started to perceive that it's part of a deeper intellectual culture that touches multiple different religions, multiple different schools of thought, multiple different countries and perspectives on the world. So I thought I was getting something quite beautiful on its own, but it was far more profound than I had realized. And Buddhist texts, of course, are the basis of a lot of modern meditation techniques, especially in the West. So I found an interesting connection there. And certainly this applies to modern Indian languages without question. I needed to learn Hindi for some of my work, and through the connection and grounding that I had in Sanskrit, I could pick it up pretty easily. I could see connections between words like ha and he, and words like asti and santi, and I thought that was just very cool to see. Again, there's this deep connection between what we study, which is this ancient language, and the deep roots that it has through the modern languages and cultures and customs that we have today. It was around this time, too, that I got curious about learning Latin. In the West, especially in classical studies, Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin are kind of the trifecta. And I wanted to understand all three of them very well to see these deep connections. And when I was learning about Latin, I found this lovely book that changed the way that I think about language instruction in general. For those of you involved in Samskritabharathi programs, maybe the lessons that I learned here are not so new to you, but they were very new to me and very shocking because I had learned Sanskrit as this old thing through grammar rules and through instruction and translation exercises. But through this book in particular, I learned that language could be learned as a living, breathing thing. This book in particular starts with a very simple Latin story, and you can read this first paragraph here. Roma in Italia est, Italia in Europa est, Graecia in Europa est. And through a little bit of context and a careful use of images and maps, you can read this Latin paragraph without ever having once to look up an English word or understand what this means. And that was really shocking to me. By going through this book, I found that I could read native Latin poetry and Latin verse of a pretty intermediate level, but still native stuff by expert poets like Catullus without ever having to study grammar or learn about rules. And my Sanskrit knowledge might have helped here to some extent, but it really changed how I saw this language as something living and breathing that we could use in everyday life. And there's an obvious connection to the work that Samskritabharathi is doing, of course. At the time when I found out about this approach to learning language, I was in a different city, in a different career where it was difficult to connect with these programs. But even so, I got very excited about the potential of teaching Sanskrit not through grammar, but through interesting content, which is where I think Sanskrit education needs to go. So I started making this one project that you might have seen called Amarahasa, where I was writing original Sanskrit stories with a very small level of grammatical assistance, but mainly focusing on interesting content. And one of the main series that I have here is actually a simplified telling of the Ramayana. So you see here the first page of the first little book in this series. Ramo Naraha, Ramo Balavan, Ramo Balavan Naraha. So through careful repetition and simple sentence structures, and by offering translations in context, for example, that the word Naraha means man, someone can read Sanskrit continuously and slowly build up their exposure to the language in a natural context without ever having to study rules or grammar. And this might be a strange proposition to people who are used to studying Sanskrit through grammar and rules. But this approach, I find, is not only much more enjoyable, but leads more deeply to the proficiency gains that help us engage with texts like the Ramayana, the Bhattikavyam, and this deeper engagement with what this literature actually is and what it means. I'll return to that theme in a moment, but I stopped work on that to go in a different direction because I realized that there was a deeper problem with Sanskrit education and Sanskrit in the world that I wanted to focus on and spend my time on. And it's really this problem, if you haven't really seen the headlines. There is a risk that Sanskrit education itself can be endangered, especially as there's a rising focus on Sanskrit in the West, and there's not as much infrastructural support for deep scholarly Sanskrit study in India. Of a certain kind there is, yes, but we need much more and a deeper engagement with modern technology and tradition as well. We also have this problem of manuscript preservation. A lot of Sanskrit manuscripts, they don't survive for very long, a couple centuries at most, and India is a very hot and humid climate generally. So because of that, manuscripts are especially vulnerable. And if they're not carefully preserved and translated and read, they'll just rot away. Let me see if I can move this picture here. Yeah, rare palm leaf manuscripts left to decay and rot if we're not careful. So I decided I wanted to spend my time on a different kind of project, one that would help take these manuscripts that maybe have been published as books, turn them into scanned PDFs, and from there into digital text. And digital text is very interesting because it's easier to read, easier to share, and you can do much more with it. So I started a new project in June of last year called Ambuda, which has two main focuses. The first is to help make this proofreading easier. So here you see on the bottom a PDF that we've uploaded, and by running optical character recognition, or OCR, we can create a plain text version on the left-hand side. And through these tools and this platform that we've built, people can come together to collaboratively take these texts that are so hard to read in these PDF forms and turn them into text that anyone can use and understand. And once we have that, we can do very interesting things on top. So here's a very small example in our online library, which is our second main focus. So once we have this text, and please forgive any typos, this is an early prototype, we can convert this into Kannada script if someone wants to read in that instead. It only takes a second to do that in the browser. Or if someone wants to read these texts in a different interface instead of English, we now support not only English and Sanskritam, but also Telugu, Hindi, and others are coming online as well. Our goal is to create a library that everyone around the world can come to and understand and see all of Sanskrit literature in high quality in one place with modern technology. And this isn't even the end of this story. Once we have something like this text, we can run very powerful tools on top to do things like Santi Vigraha and Padacheda. So here we have an example with the first verse of the Meghadutam, and you can see, just clicking on this verse, now we have all these links and the Sandhi is undone. And if we click on these words, we can have a view of a dictionary as well, here showing the Apte dictionary. And this is very powerful for Sanskrit studies. I think a lot of people feel scared about approaching this literature that they really care about, whether it's Kavya, whether it's Jyotisha, or whatever it might be. But by building these savvy linguistic tools, integrating a text with Sandhi Vigraha, Padacheda, dictionary, and more kinds of analysis, we can make it easier than ever for people to access this literature on its own terms and understand what it means. And this, for me, is the real draw of Sanskrit. Obviously, we have it in conversation, and that's important and really wonderful. But at least for me personally, I learned Sanskrit because I want to understand what these ancient things are. these foundations and these cornerstones of modern culture, of our Indian culture. And I think that's a very beautiful thing to connect to, and I want to make it as easy as possible for people to do this. One last tool that we're working on as well that's a bit more technical, and again, this is a work in progress, so there are mistakes, is bringing in grammatical knowledge. So we have texts and traditions like the Ashtadhyayi that will take a word and deeply explain how it was created systematically. And if we integrate these tools with modern techniques as well, through the simulator, for example, that we're building that will run these rules, we can help people deeply understand grammar at the same time that they're learning content. So I think there's enormous potential for technology to change how we learn and study Sanskrit. And especially in this new era with the promising AI technology, I think we are due in the next 10 or 15 years especially for a profound change in how people around the world engage with Sanskrit, learn Sanskrit, and study and promote it. And as for why this is important, what is the point of all this? Well, I had always had this view growing up that Sanskrit is kind of like this big rock, you know, it goes back thousands of years, and you go and take a look at it, and it's very beautiful, and it's interesting. And then you kind of go on with your life and do other things. It's fun to look in the past. But my image of Sanskrit has changed from this kind of rock to this kind of very deep and intricate tree that extends to so many different languages. You see connections to Greek and to Latin. You see connections to Pali and to Hindi and to other modern Indian languages. You see connections to Hinduism and Buddhism and atheism and different kinds of scientific and mathematical traditions. And really this profound root that, this profound tree that has as its root Sanskrit and Sanskrit literature. And when I say that, I don't mean at all to make other literature and languages like Tamil or other traditions secondary. I just wish to emphasize that Sanskrit has a very powerful root that goes back thousands of years, and it's a very profound one that affects much of how we see ourselves as either people who are Indian or people who engage with Indian culture. And that's what I find so beautiful about it. And this tree, if you trace it further and further back, ultimately does, I think, have its root in Vedic literature and the language of the rishis. And there's something, I think, very profound about that. Whether people agreed or disagreed with it, that starting point is sort of the cornerstone of the intellectual conversation of India. And as for why I think this is so beautiful and so important, my view personally is that although ancient literature and ancient people are not perfect, this ancient literature has this profound view on different kinds of values and what it means to be a human being, what kinds of perspectives are important, what it means to live a good life, and values that are maybe not so represented in our modern life, in terms of how we relate to each other and to animal life, how we relate to the environment, or what kinds of pastimes or good use of time. And I have found personally that Sanskrit literature is a very deep expression of these values, and it makes it easy to understand why these things are important, why we should care about this, what it means to either be Indian or to have some root in this culture. And I think that's a very profound thing, no matter where you are religiously, no matter where you are historically, to have this understanding is very beautiful. And it's difficult to summarize what exactly this literature means. I think I'd have to be much more realized than I am to say. But one phrase that has stuck with me that I think is a simple explanation and expression of this beautiful literature is the phrase Satyam Vada Dharmanchara. So this means, of course, to speak the truth and to conduct dharma, or to do dharma. And to speak the truth is an interesting call to action, because we need to know what the truth is. We need to perceive it very carefully. We need to watch the world very deeply and understand without preconception what is going on. But it's not enough to understand. We have to speak this truth so that others can understand our understanding, so others can understand how we see the world. And if we're wrong, people can correct us, and together we can come together and understand what this world is that we're living in. And then once we see this world accurately, dharmanchara, we need to act in this world appropriately. And this means understanding what is good and bad action, What does it mean to be a developed human being? What are the things that are appropriate and correct? Especially in a world like ours, where technology of different kinds is constantly coming out, or our world is constantly changing. To have this root in a very simple value of seeing truth, of speaking truth, of seeing correct action and taking action, and learning constantly as we do so. I think this is a very profound place to really start our investigation of what it means to be a good human being and what it means to engage with Sanskrit. So I thank you very much for your time. I can't say this is how everyone sees Sanskrit. This is just how I see Sanskrit. I think it's a profound and beautiful thing. And the more deeply we connect with this literature, whether good or bad, whether we like it or dislike it, whether it supports our preconceptions or challenges them, the more we do that, the more we can really develop as human beings and take useful and delightful action in this world. Thank you very much. Useful and delightful action.
Namaste everyone. So I will be going over the registration process for the upcoming year for our Kendram Samskritabharathi Irvine chapter. The national team of Samskritabharathi has decided to do all the classes from all Kendrams in person since last year. But because a few centers were still going through this COVID recovery stuff and teachers were not available, and we did a polling last year regarding whether our Kendram should do in person or online, and some teachers were also not ready at that time. We did not have the enough support volunteer teachers to do in-person classes last year, so we could not do it. But this year again, the stress from the national team is that all Kendrams should do in-person classes only, and it is kind of agreeable to think on that front, because what we have seen also is especially for kids, it is more effective if kids have the in-person classes, and that will give more so that we can give more importance and attention to each student. Because what happens online is, like, kids always they easily tend to be distracted because of so many activities going around them at home, and they have computer in front of them, they have keyboard in front of them, so it's very difficult actually to manage that and make sure kids are very attentive, and the output of online classes is not that effective, especially for kids, compared to in-person classes. So we as a Kendram also have we have got the same feedback from from all the teachers teaching our Kendram also, that it would be better if we go in person. And we have looked at several places which will be convenient for people across in the Southern California region, like there are kids from Irvine, there are kids from Torrance, there are kids from Anaheim, there are kids from Artesia area, Cypress area. So Anaheim Gayatri Center, which we all saw for the GoshThi annual event, was very ideal to have in-person classes next year. So it has a lot of I think it has 8 rooms, individual rooms, where we can have different classes at the same time. So we are therefore conducting all our classes next year in person, and that will be every Saturday 9:30 to 11 a.m. all levels will be in person there, and along with that we are also doing L1 class for adults. Like if you're a parent coming there to drop your kids, and this will be a very good opportunity for parents to join an L1 class where again a teacher will be available, adult class teacher will be available to teach in person L1 class. This is a very good opportunity for all the parents also to start Sanskrit classes. So it will be at this Gayatri Center, as I was mentioning earlier, in Anaheim. And more information on the registration and other information, as soon as the registration process is open, will be available at our website irvine.samskritabharathiusa.org. So we will definitely email you also, like if you are in our mailing list, we'll email you as to when the registration process for the next year will start. Hopefully at this point of time, we are thinking like the registration process will start May 1st this year, and hopefully by end of June we should be able to conclude the registration, and come August we'll be starting our classes. Alright, so if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the teachers, or you can contact us through our website also, or you can directly call any of the local teachers whom you are in contact with. Okay? Thank you so much. Dhanyavadaha.